Argentina has been gripped by this case.
La investigación por la muerte del fiscal Alberto Nisman, hablando en Radio 10 ahora en vivo. ¿Qué es lo que dijo?
Worst political scandal in years.
Alrededor de un tema que nos conmueve a todos los argentinos, como es la muerte
a los asistentes de la turba multitudinaria siguen sumándose, cubriendo de paraguas las calles de Buenos Aires.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're following this week. A suspicious death in Buenos Aires, and the case for and against the Argentinian media for their coverage of the story. Al Jazeera defends itself against charges of negligence leveled by one of its own employees who's fresh out of jail in Cairo. The ratings are down to a mere 690 million viewers for the biggest television event anywhere, in China. And breaking down the political story in Greece. When an Argentinian judge dismissed a legal case against her this past Thursday, President Cristina Kirchner gained a measure of vindication. Not that all of the media in that country will see it that way. This story goes back to 1994 and the bombing of a Jewish community center that killed 85 people, 86 if you now count the name of Alberto Nisman among them. Nisman was the prosecutor in the case who was found dead of a bullet to the head 6 weeks ago, the day before he was to testify at a congressional committee. Nisman's investigation was focusing on President Kirchner, his working theory being that her government was covering up evidence in the case. In the weeks between the discovery of Nisman's body and the judge throwing the case out of court, there has been frenzied coverage that's unfolded across a domestic media landscape that's a story in itself. President Kirchner's government has passed laws to redraw the media map in Argentina, a process that threatened the country's biggest media company, a conglomerate called Grupo Clarín. Now, there's no love lost between Clarín and this government, and that's been evident in the coverage of the case. And with a presidential election coming up later this year, the fallout could well have an impact on who ends up holding power in Argentina. This is a complicated headline story with multiple characters and layers, featuring a surplus of speculation, accusations, and acrimony, and a critical shortage of hard facts. Our starting point this week is the capital, Buenos Aires. Four voices on the death of Alberto Nisman and what it all means for Argentina. The journalist from a pro-government newspaper, Página 12, or Page 12. An editor from the anti-government paper, Clarín. The editor-in-chief of the Buenos Aires Herald, a paper that's more down the middle. And the Argentinian academic living abroad.
Los medios oficialistas que son aquí muy potentes.
The official media here are really powerful, and she is the most important media in the country. The president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
So what the media has done, and specifically Clarín, is what you can call muddying the waters. It may sound cheap, but it's exactly what they're doing, publishing hypothesis as fact. And what this does is to confuse.
The atmosphere surrounding the news in Argentina is basically an extreme polarization between two axes. Between these two poles, it is sometimes difficult to maintain a rigorous approach with the facts and separate truth from fiction.
The balanced interpretation of events, I think, is now not in the realm of the media, but in the realm of the emancipated reader. You need to read two newspapers in order to get some level of facts or some level of truth behind the story.
Argentina has had multiple governments since the bombing of the Jewish community center. However, the crime has never been solved. One popular theory implicated agents from Iran and suggested that successive governments, not just Kirchner's, covered up the evidence because they needed Iranian oil. The government's recent move to replace Argentina's intelligence agency with a new federal body has created further enemies within the state. And President Kirchner's leftist ways are not popular in Washington. The prosecutor, Nisman, was known to be close to the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires. So there is plenty there for the conspiratorially minded to work with on both sides.
The opposition and the opposition media say that to silence a prosecutor who had accused the president, somebody in government must have killed him. That's what they spread.
Just this past weekend, a columnist in Clarín wrote that there are rumors saying Nisman was assassinated by an Iranian-Venezuelan commando trained in Cuba. It was the combination of everything a middle-class Argentinian would find evil.
The stance of the official media was in general to discredit the victim with political arguments, like one that said that he was a spokesman for the CIA, Mossad and the United States Embassy.
Él iba a la embajada y la embajada le decía directamente que había que acusar a Irán.
The official media have tried hard to link Nisman with the interests of Argentina's enemies.
Therefore, it's within the framework of these two poles that the news coverage relating to the Nisman case has developed.
The prosecutor's widow went before the Argentinian Senate, asking that Nisman's death not be politicized.
En el caso que se confirme que esto fue un hecho criminal, no ayuda esta sobreexposición mediática.
Her request went unfulfilled. President Kirchner is not the only leftist South American leader who must contend with the bulk of private media with owners who lean to the political right. Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, Rafael Correa in Ecuador, and others face similar challenges. But Kirchner was the first to try to reshape domestic media. In 2009, her government passed a law mandating that media ownership be divided into 3 equal parts: 1/3 owned by the state, 1/3 in private hands, and the remainder to be community-owned. The Clarín Group has been fighting that law in the courts, and when one of its papers published a draft document written by the prosecutor recommending that the president be arrested, one of Kirchner's senior aides tore the paper to shreds, literally.
The fact that a political authority tore an Argentinian newspaper in half was unfortunate because it gives the impression that freedom of expression is limited, and that's not the case in Argentina. The truth is that the draft was irrelevant, both for the investigation of the death of the prosecutor and to the bombing. But we still spent a week discussing it.
Her and her husband Nestor's approach of challenging the media served them well for a long time. They tapped into a feeling of public anger that was deployed effectively to the detriment of the media. In recent times, however, a kind of fatigue has set in, because you can't really blame Clarín for everything. The facts won't stand up. You can't say the media is to blame for the political or the economic crisis, and also not this case.
Or can you? Political parties almost always welcome the support of a media company, particularly one as big as Clarín. There's a cautionary tale, though, along similar lines that comes from the United States, the Republican Party, and the conservative Fox News. When Fox moved on from reporting on the political agenda to setting it, a conservative Republican famously said, "We used to think that Fox News worked for us. It turns out that we work for Fox News."
We work for Fox. La muerte del fiscal Nisman.
There's a lesson in there somewhere for the Argentinian opposition parties and Clarín.
The Kirchners found in Clarín the perfect enemy to antagonize with, and the government's been pretty successful electorally taking advantage of this antagonism. And it has harmed the opposition because Clarín adopted a more virulent role, setting the agenda at the expense of the opposition. The opposition were following Clarin's agenda, and to an extent it has benefited, paradoxically, the government.
On the download this week, our viewers weigh in on the coverage of the story in Argentina.
Well, the pro-government media in Argentina has pretty much sided with whatever the government's theory about Nisman's death was. If you try to read a more objective news outlet, it's going to be harder to find one since right now the population is very divided. It's really, really hard to find a media outlet that tries to cover the case in an objective way.
There are alternative media sources that Argentines are turning to for coverage of the Nisman scandal. There's the Association of Independent and Cultural Magazines called Jazeera, which is an association of over 300 independent publications throughout the whole country. And people are really looking towards independent media, especially La Vaca. They've done a lot of really great radio, print, and video content about the issue.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week. In Egypt, the legal nightmare continues for two Al Jazeera journalists, one of whom has criticized the network for what he calls epic negligence. Both Mohammed Fahmy and Bahar Mohammed have had their retrial hearing postponed until March 8th. The two are now out on bail after spending more than 400 days behind bars.
Not providing a safe working environment, no press passes, no licenses to equipment.
Fahmy has done multiple interviews saying that Al Jazeera executives in Doha failed to take heed of his warnings prior to the arrests. He said that the network's decision to take reports from correspondents on Al Jazeera English and then reversion them for use on Al Jazeera's Egyptian channel, Mubashir Misra, which had been banned by the authorities, put AJE staff in peril. He also accused Al Jazeera's owner, the state of Qatar, of abusing its Al Jazeera Arabic platform in waging a media war against Egypt. The Free AJE staff campaign was taken up by many media outlets, including Britain's Channel 4, with chief anchor Jon Snow being a particularly visible supporter. Channel 4 did an extended piece on the case this past week using an interview filmed 2 months ago with AJE's head of news, Salah Negam, in which he denied Fahmy's allegations.
There is no concrete evidence that someone told us, don't work in Egypt. Never happened.
Al Jazeera also issued a statement saying that AJE and Mubashir Misra are separate channels, and that Al Jazeera, Mubashir Misra, used footage from a variety of sources, including international news agencies. Also in Cairo this past week, a court has sentenced a blogger, Alaa Abdel Fattah, to 5 years in prison. Abdel Fattah was widely read during the Arab Spring demonstrations that led to the fall of the Mubarak regime. He was sentenced for organizing and attending a protest in 2013, which was called to protest a new law in Egypt that banned protests. So the media story in Egypt continues. It's looking like open season for some famous talking heads in the U.S. news business. First, it was NBC's Brian Williams who lost the anchor chair after being caught in a lie over his war reporting from Iraq. Now it's Bill O'Reilly of Fox News, whose integrity is being called into question. A report published in the liberal political magazine Mother Jones says that O'Reilly's Brian Williams problem dates back to 1982, when he was reporting on the Falklands War for CBS News.
Right. Because I was in a situation one time in a war zone in Argentina in the Falklands.
O'Reilly has said that he was in a combat zone, a war zone, although he was reporting at the time from Buenos Aires, since no CBS reporters actually made it to the islands. Plus, the war had just ended, and the worst thing that O'Reilly witnessed was an anti-government demonstration in the capital. Bill O'Reilly has denied Mother Jones's allegation, calling the report a piece of garbage.
Some left-wing zealots have attacked me, your humble correspondent.
However, numerous other journalists in Argentina at the time backed the magazine's version of events. They included one former CBS reporter who said that what O'Reilly called a war zone was more of an expense account zone. NBC's Brian Williams was the subject of what the network called an internal investigation before being suspended for 6 months. No such probe has been held at Fox News, and it now appears that O'Reilly, who has the highest ratings at the conservative news network, is going absolutely nowhere. The ratings are now in for one of the biggest events on the American television calendar, last week's Academy Awards. Those figures are down from last year, but still, an audience of 36.5 million is nothing to sneeze at, unless you're Chinese. A week and a half ago, the Spring Festival Gala, which marks the Chinese New Year, was broadcast on the state-owned CCTV. There, too, the numbers were down to a mere 690 million viewers. The ratings for the gala actually peaked in 2009 when more than 800 million people watched. To put that into perspective, 800 million is the equivalent of the combined populations of the United States, Brazil, Russia, and Japan, every last person watching the same television program. The gala is a song and dance extravaganza with star hosts and acrobatics thrown in. The program has been on the air for 32 years now, and it's grown progressively more politicized. Last year, the chief executive of CCTV announced that the gala would henceforth be considered a national project along the lines of the opening ceremonies for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. In other words, they take it very seriously. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on the most watched TV show on the planet and the politics behind it.
The TV business is all about the numbers, the cost of production against the number of viewers, and the ad revenues which are based on those ratings. Nowhere are the numbers bigger than on Chinese state TV during the annual Spring Festival Gala, when China puts on a show.
CCTV's Spring Festival Gala is probably unique amongst television programs anywhere in the world. The government says it's, I think, something along the lines of 700 million viewers at one time. That figure is probably believable because in every household virtually during Chinese New Year's Eve, as people are gathered together, that's the program that is on the television.
The CCTV Gala show has become a part of the ritual of the Chinese New Year celebration. Since 1983, it has become part of the cultural institution in China. Chinese New Year's Eve dinner is a bit like the Christmas dinner in the West. And the CCTV Gala has become a turkey.
So the Gala manufactures this kind of imaginary China, creates this illusion of harmony and solidarity. This is the time where realities, harsh realities are glossed over, and this is all more about making people feel good. This year, the show really foregrounds ordinary people. Ordinary Joes, the masses, which is very different from previous shows, with the focus very much on the rich and the famous, the powerful, the celebrities. You have videotaped inserts of ordinary people getting on with their lives and turning around to camera and saying, Happy New Year.
This year was notable for the first year where they had comedy routines that dealt with the topic of anti-corruption, which is unusual. Usually the Gala tries to steer very far away from talking about political issues, particularly having to do with officials. This year, the reading, if you talk to media critics, is that this is CCTV and the government trying to prove that they are confident about their anti-corruption campaign, confident enough to make fun of corrupt officials.
The Gala could well have had some fun at the expense of the channel broadcasting it. Last year, 8 CCTV employees, including 2 on-screen personalities and 2 senior executives, were all fired. The allegations of graft focused on favorable coverage given in exchange for bribes. The song and dance routine of the Gala hasn't papered over the network's tattered reputation.
In fact, China Central Television is a much laughed at network. And its reputation has been tainted recently by a slew of scandals, corruption shakedowns. So in a way, it's interesting, for the party to really try to use CCTV's Gala to lend legitimacy and credibility to itself. And I'm not sure if that works out in the end.
The political overtones of the Gala were evident in the lineup of hosts, 8 of them anchoring this year's show. One name, one face stood out: Negmat Rahman. Rahman is a Uyghur Muslim from the northwestern province of Xinjiang, the site of an insurgency and clashes between the Uyghurs and security forces. Beijing has stepped up security in Xinjiang, citing the threat of a, quote, global jihadi ideology. Putting Rahman front and center of the Gala was a significant move. He is the first ever show host to come from a minority, non-Han ethnic background.
He's young, he's cool, he's quite good looking, but importantly, his identity as a Uyghur. And in the past 1 year, there's been lots of trouble, which caused the tension between the Han and the Uyghur nationalities. So this, again, the China's effort to kind of try to put a happy, united front and saying he's a good guy.
One of the frustrations you talk to Uyghurs that they have is that they are sort of portrayed often by state media or in state-sanctioned events as happy dancing minorities, and they're usually there for entertainment. And I could see how some might see the fact that Rahman's not really marking a qualitative change whatsoever. I mean, he's still there as an entertainer, and the message still seems to be that Uyghurs are okay as long as they're entertainers.
National unity, military strength, economic progress, social harmony. Over 4 hours, the Springfest Gala is a messaging marathon. The meta-narrative that ties it all together? The primacy of the Communist Party.
There's an entire song dedicated to Xi Jinping. The lyrical eulogy is accompanied by sleekly put together montage of Xi Jinping visiting ordinary people. to say I haven't seen this kind of blatant cult of personality in years, not since Mao's era.
After 3 decades in business, the Spring Festival Gala still relies on a predictable mix of heavy-handed propaganda and visual tricks. Viewing figures remain high. CCTV says 690 million people tuned in this year, but many of those viewers are on social media providing instant feedback, and not all the reviews are positive. On Sina Weibo, China's version of Twitter, a user called the music video of Xi Jinping sickening and horrible. Another said the gala was in service of politics with too many songs that are fake, hollow and empty. It used to be fun to watch the galas when I was younger, posted another. Now I'd rather sleep than watch it.
I think it's quite impossible to keep that kind of high rating. There are many reasons. Some people complaining, structure's the same soup, different broth, and the people complaining it's nothing new, no lack of creativity.
The last year's director of the show complained about the show is really tailor-made to the party's perfection rather to the audience's liking. His ability to make a show that's popular was pretty much hijacked by back and forth censorship requirement.
This year, quite a few local stations have decided to reject to show CCTV Gala. Instead, they will show their own version of the New Year Gala, which is probably more catered to the local taste, local interest.
There's a satellite TV station in Henan, for example, that is very famous for putting on what many people say is a vastly more entertaining Spring Festival Gala on a different night that pulls in sort of real, genuine stars, kind of foreign and domestic. And then just completely apart from that, I mean, there's social media. There's an infinite number of different things that divide people's attention.
This program once had a captive audience of more than 1 billion people. It is now dealing with a changing market. Much has been made of the new China, the looming superpower competing with the world. On this evidence of this program, it is clear it has come up against a formidable challenger. A revolution that is about the media, about social engagement, and about changing Chinese society.
The impasse between the European Union and Syriza, the newly elected ruling party in Greece, boils down to how the country is going to settle its debt. Greece says it doesn't want to be set up to fail through the imposition of austerity measures, and the EU just wants to get its money back. Now, how to go about that is about as complicated as are the policies of all of the governments involved. But we now owe a debt of gratitude to a Dutch satirical program that's called Cojones, which has tried to tell the story of this political showdown through rap. In the red corner, on the left, there's the Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, and Russia's president, Vladimir Putin. And in the blue corner, on the right, we have the Dutch minister of finance, Jeroen Dijsselbloem, and Germany's chancellor, that's Angela, M to the E to the R to the K to the E to the L, Merkel. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
Jeroen Dijsselbloem, boem, ik spit er meteen. Ik ben minister van Geld, een politiek fenomeen. Dat ik deskundig ben, nou dat zie je direct aan de frons in mijn kop en aan mijn zuinige bek. Ik ben de juiste man, op de juiste plek. Laat de Grieken maar komen, want ik maak ze gek. Ik pak de centen terug, omdat dat mijn taak is. En jij gaat mij niet stoppen, Janis Varoufakis.
Wat ik wel of niet doe, bepaal ik zelf nog steeds. Schud mijn hand dan normaal, man, ik heb toch geen aids. Wat zit je nou te loeren met je gierige tronie? We zijn ons eigen land, geen Europese kolonie. Je vindt jezelf deskundig. Waar heb jij gestudeerd? Wageningen? Goh, gefeliciteerd. Ik heb aan Cambridge economie gedoseerd. Maar hey, jij mag het zeggen. Wat doen we verkeerd?
Jullie economie ligt aan duigen en flarden. We steunen die shizzle met onze miljarden. Oké, Janis, je hebt het zelf gewild. Angela, kill!
M to de E-R-K-E-L. Aufmachen bitte een beetje snel. Anders ga ik je hup uit Europa lozen. Dan loop je in lampen en woon je in dozen.
En we rijden op ezels en dan eten we stenen. Die goedkope dreigementen, dat kun je niet menen. Ik doe de deur open en je ramt er je voet in. Prima joh, chill, ga ik toch lekker naar Poetin.
Poetin in de house, de schrik van het Westen. Jaag ze maar naar mij, dan mag je Poetin gaan testen. Kom maar hier, Janis, want ik lust ze rauw. Dan weet je zeker niet precies meer wat je zeggen wou, of wel?
Halt dein Maul, Griekenland is van ons.
Wat zij zegt, maar dan met de diepere frons. Maak het uit, Varoufakis, geef dat wijf toch de bons.
Laat me even denken, ik kom zo met de respons.